The Holy Gospel according to Luke. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do, for I have no place to store my crops?" Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods, and I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich towards God." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Christ. Do you ever worry about money? If so, you're not alone. An early April survey by the U.S. News and World Report reveals that more than 2/3 of Americans these days are experiencing financial anxiety. And nearly 32% of the respondents say the cause of their financial anxiety is the increase in prices due to inflation. Worries abound. Will I have enough in my account to pay the bills this month? Can I afford to take a vacation? How will I pay for my children's college education? Will my retirement savings last me until the last day of my life? I see similar worries in that man who asked Jesus to tell his brother to divide his inheritance with him. He has a mentality of scarcity and seems worried about having enough. And perhaps his brother worries too, and so he's been dragging his feet and giving him his due portion. Well, Jesus, who has a knack of seeing deeply into people and situations, tells him straight out that he will not play the role of arbitrator. And then he uses this man's request as a teachable moment to teach not just that man, but the whole gathered crowd. And yes, the whole gathered assembly here this morning, either in person or online. Did you catch what Jesus said? Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. These days, the size of our houses and the proliferation of rental storage units reveal the extent to which we have heeded Jesus' warning. A caution about excessive consumerism doesn't get much airtime. Just consider the messages that we're bombarded with many times a day through various media channels. Advertisers constantly persuade us to buy some product to fill a perceived void in our lives. This model of car will provide the ultimate in driving enjoyment. You'll never be bored behind the wheel again. This brand of toothpaste will whiten your teeth and raise your sex appeal. This particular fashion brand of clothes will get you noticed as someone who is trendy. And you know, there may be a kernel of truth in almost every advertisement, but never the whole truth. And buying things can become addictive. It feels good. Each purchase brings a little adrenaline surge of satisfaction. but the feeling doesn't last long, and it can never fully satisfy our inner cravings. Barbara Brown Taylor recognizes this, and she puts it this way: once you have woken up from your stuff-induced stupor, once you have unplugged yourself from a commercial culture long enough for your numbness to wear off, once you have recovered enough feeling to know that the malaise you have been tamping down inside of you is not about needing more stuff at all, but needing a larger purpose, then what are you going to do? I think she points us to the heart of the matter. Behind all of our greed is an attempt to fill a hole in our soul. It might be loneliness or lowliness, grief or boredom, heartbreak or heartache. And we often chase after a lie, thinking that with enough money we can purchase just the right things and experiences to fill that hole. Today, Jesus cautions us about living such a lie. Hear it again. Take care, be on guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And then he punctuates his warning with this parable of a rich man becoming even richer because of that year's abundant harvest. Jesus tells parables to free us up to live more God-centered lives. And they're not easily interpreted. If we think we got the meaning, we probably haven't finished with that parable yet, for they have multifaceted meanings. They work their magic as we turn them over inside our minds and begin to wonder what they might mean for us. So how do we see ourselves reflected in this particular parable? I think in many ways, we all can relate to this rich man. Who among us has never entertained a desire to be rich? Good fortune has smiled on the rich man, so he concocts his own personal retirement plan. I'll tear down my old barns and build bigger ones. And did you notice that it wasn't barn, but barns? Let your imagination decide how many. It's a well-reasoned plan, granting him security for the rest of his life. But notice who and what is missing in this scenario. He was thinking only of himself. There's no mention of family or community. He's turned in on himself. He speaks his plan to himself. There's no room for sharing in this self-centered plan. There's no room for the unexpected. And before his plan can be implemented, God interrupts. You fool. You won't be around long enough to carry out this plan. So then, in regard to all your stuff, whose will they be? Whenever I get dreaming about winning $1 billion lottery, like happened for someone in Des Plaines this week, whenever I get overly focused on my own self, my own stuff, my own security, I too need to hear God say, "You fool." And the part of me that was chasing the lie needs to die so that I might more fully live. For true riches are measured in the quality of relationships and in the sharing of the abundance that we've been given. Even though this rich man had experienced God's abundant and that year's plentiful crop, he still acted with a mentality of scarcity. If he had had a mentality of abundance and generosity, I wonder what else he could have thought of to do with his excess grain. Once upon a time, a man and a wife decided to have an in-ground pool built in their backyard. And after a couple of summers, the man mentioned to his wife that he really was not enjoying their new pool like he'd expected to. Well, this got the wife to thinking, and the next summer, every week she got on the phone and invited friends and family over for a weekly Friday night cookout and pool party. by sharing their pool, they finally received a return on their investment. Their dividends arrived in deeper connections with friends and family, eating and playing together, and living with a spirit of generosity. Here's another scenario. There's a group of tourists stuck out on a raft lost off the coast of Brazil. They've been drifting for days and were in the sweltering hot sun, and they'd run out of both food and water. They were panicking, arguing, and bickering about what to do. And eventually, they all perished. And the most tragic part, the water that they were found floating on turned out to be fresh, because they were at a spot where a large river emptied into the sea. They were surrounded by everything they needed. We too are surrounded by all that we need. We're surrounded by generosity, empathy, and compassion, by joy and laughter and love. We're surrounded by truly amazing people doing truly amazing things. God has surrounded us with abundance, not scarcity. We have everything we need to live abundant, worry-free lives. Are you ready for this kind of turnabout in your life today? Are you ready for a lifetime of sound sleep, free from worries? Jesus today speaks a truth that's meant to set us free. One's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Are you ready to discover together what it does consist of? This is one of the main things that congregations are for, to be a community that discovers together how best to live with a mentality of abundance, giving and receiving love, stewarding all creation, seeking justice and equality for all people, forgiving and being forgiven, caring and being cared for. Discovering what life does consist of is a lifelong journey. Wise elders stand like signposts along the path for those who follow, generation after generation. And one thing that I've learned from some of my elders is that you can only learn about this by living in such a way that you give yourself away, not storing anything up in larger and larger barns. In Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, there was a wise monk named Father Zosima. And in a scene where he converses with a wealthy woman, this woman is in anguish about the existence of God. He tells her that only by acts of love will she be able to know God. Try to love your neighbor. Love them actively and unceasingly. And as you learn to love them more and more, you will be more and more convinced of the existence of God and of the immortality of your own soul. Well, at first, Father Zosima's words comfort the woman. She confesses that she often imagines giving away her wealth in order to live a life of poverty and service to the poor. She tells him that this image brings her tears of joy. But then, as she entertains the fantasy of a life of Christian service, she worries that the people that she would serve would be unappreciative of her sacrifice and efforts. She realizes that she would be unable to tolerate ingratitude. I want to be praised and paid for love with love, she says. And so her dream of serving others dies. And she continues to wonder if God exists. Dostoevsky's little scene there seems to echo what I found in my meditation from this morning from the medieval German mystic Meister Eckhart. There, Where clinging to things ends is where God begins to be. If a cask is to contain wine, you must first pour out the water. The cask must be bare and empty. Therefore, if you wish to receive divine joy and God, first pour out your clinging to things. The riches of life don't exist in an abundance of possessions, but rather in being rich towards God and the things God loves. We have our whole lifetime to gather in these riches, the riches of relationships, the riches found in giving ourselves away, the riches that cannot be grasped but only given, the riches of an abundant life that are given to us through bread and cup, through water and word. These are the things that ultimately fill the holes in our souls. And then there's a valuable side benefit too. The security that we can only receive from God puts all of our worries into proper perspective. Amen.